Sure.
So
All right. So there's a lot on the table, but let's start out with the election.
that's fine.
Yeah. I mean,
Who won?
well, that's the question. What,
Yeah.
what could be more important a subject than that?
Yeah.
All right. So yeah, there's a lot going on, Mike. Michael Shaw's with me as we're doing this program every Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Charles Moscowitz, thanks for joining me, everyone, live on YouTube and subscribing platforms. I've got a new blog that I'm working on now every day at Medium, and that's actually getting some traction. I'm putting things up there every day. Already, I'm getting insults.
Oh, wow, that's a good sign.
um, and I'm also doing TikTok, which is a very interesting medium, and I'm yeah, I'm responding to people's little videos and making them little videos of my own. So I'm trying to branch out a bit.
Does that
Um,
mean you sold out to the Chinese though?
oh
If you're on
yes,
TikTok?
definitely. Yeah. Who knows? I mean, if they want to look at my stuff, that's fine with me. So, Mike, obviously, we have to talk about the most important story right now, which is the election and who won. Um, I think that it's going to be very tough, but I do think that at the end of the day, President Trump will be sworn in on January 20th, even if the media doesn't admit it.
Whoa, so you're positive now because you were frightening.
I'm very cautiously positive. I'm seeing developments, and it's the mainstream media is still having a virtual blackout, which I think is going to hurt them
Yeah.
because if and when he wins, people are going to be in shock because most average people don't know what's going on. So, what is going on? Well, yeah, a few days ago, North Carolina was called for Trump. They wouldn't admit this, but it was. And Tom Tillis was reelected to the U.S. Senate. I just saw that Sullivan in Alaska has now been officially reelected to the U.S. Senate, which brings the Senate up to 50 confirmed Republican senators. And North Carolina was worth 15 electors. Alaska, which is really you know, into any minute, is worth 3 electors. Now, the two that we need to watch this week, and I think we'll possibly get clarity till the end of the week, are Arizona and Georgia. Now, with Arizona, um,
That's been
the
nip and tuck, and it's changing every time I check.
yeah, I mean, I just checked it about an hour ago. The Biden has an edge of only 12,000 votes in a state where you had, I believe, 3 million votes cast.
And how many still need to be counted? I thought it was like,
About 50,000,
yeah,
and they're breaking for Trump. Now, um, I think Trump has a shot there. There's also now lawsuits with regard to this unprecedented level of voter fraud
right.
and ballot fraud, including this whole Sharpie thing, and there's a lot of other stuff that's gone on. And I mean, there's always voter fraud. People always vote from the grave, but it's never happened at this level. In Georgia, it was just announced that the really weak-kneed Attorney General Raffensperger, who said, "Well, sure, there's some voter fraud, but there always is, not enough to change the election." A bigger state than Arizona in terms of vote count, and more blatant fraud in that you had several counties there that were involved in this very blatant act of shutting things down before the end of election day
Now, what
eve.
is the official explanation for this almost coordinated
There
shut
is none. I mean, in Georgia, they claimed that there had been a water main break. Now,
in the whole
uh,
state?
yeah, oh no, in the select county, I think Fulton County.
Right.
Now, I don't, obviously a not an impeachable source, but he did an interview which I thought was interesting. That being former Illinois Governor Ron Blagojevich. Okay, he was in prison. He was pardoned by President Trump. Sure, he's wants to help Trump. But he made some comments that have been made by so many others, including Chris Matthews and many others over the years, which is that the way the voter fraud works is that they shut down the polling place if their guy's losing. They then, start to ship in ballots, or they fill out ballots for people who didn't vote or whatnot, and then they reopen it with their guy ahead.
Yeah.
Isn't that exactly what happened in 5, I believe 6 states, in a manner that appears to have been coordinated? Arizona has had people showing up at the polls. In one case, this woman testified. I think she's got it on affidavit. I think she was in her early 90s, and she shows up to vote, and they say, sorry, you've already voted. Now, this is and just there are so many methods of voter fraud. Obviously, someone voted for her, assuming she wasn't going to be coming in.
Right.
So she goes to a judge that day, and the judge says, sorry, too bad. You'll have to wait till next time. So I think that in Arizona, you've got a strong Republican infrastructure with a Republican governor, Ducey, that are going to look into that. And the same thing in Georgia. You've got a Republican governor, Kemp. You've got some radical, counties there. But apparently just today, the Republican weak-kneed Secretary of State has said that they're going to do a full audit of the election in all
it
counties.
just came out.
That's right. And Georgia, like Arizona, Trump is behind by less than 10,000 votes in a state that cast, I believe, over 3 million ballots. So all eyes are going to be on Arizona and Georgia within probably the end of this week, maybe early next. So that leaves the one big state, which is going to be Pennsylvania.
Now, what about, to interrupt, Real Clear Politics took Pennsylvania off the list.
Oh, yes. Yeah, which means that Biden now would technically not be the president-elect, whether he ever was.
Yeah.
And it's now like, it reminds me of the two popes, right? You don't know who's going to be the ultimate person. And so, yes, I think that there's big trouble in Pennsylvania for the liberals. There is such a pervasive degree of voter fraud in so many levels in Philadelphia, which has always had a problem anyway, and Pittsburgh, that, that combined with the Justice Alito stepping in and saying that the votes cast the day after the election have to be segregated. Now, that doesn't mean they didn't slip a lot of them in there. They probably did. But nevertheless, we're talking, I don't know, 100,000 votes there.
Oh, at least.
Yeah, exactly. And that will be the case that will reach the Supreme Court. And the language in the Constitution is clear and unambiguous. It says that the state legislature decides the voting day. And the state legislature in Pennsylvania said it's going to be a Tuesday and not after. The governor, the radical liberal governor, tried to override that with the state Supreme Court and did so. But I can't imagine that holding up constitutionally. I mean, I think that that's like, claiming that a president can serve for 5 years instead of 4. I mean, we're not talking about something here that has any ambiguity. This is clear, black and white. So that's why I think that if and when it does reach the Supreme Court, there's going to be a unanimous decision in favor of discounting those votes.
Well, let me ask you this. All right, so you're proposing that it goes through this whole process. I've seen counts based on so-called fair voting that Trump is up in the 320s. And what do you think is going to be the reaction of the media?
Well, I mean, let
me just lay this
before we get to that. I just want to finish my state by state analysis.
All right.
So I think that if Pennsylvania, it doesn't become so obvious that he won it, then it will go to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court will decide it, and that's going to be the decision that tips it for Trump's confirmation. Because if he already has Arizona and Georgia done, then it's Pennsylvania is going to be the one that puts him over the top. Now, there's also the issue of Michigan and Wisconsin.
Right.
Michigan, now there, I'm sure you might want to talk about this, but there's this domain software. We talked about this.
Oh yeah.
Where in Michigan, the Antrim County they found out that this local Republican had only gotten 2 votes, and he knew he got more than 2 votes because he had 6 people in his family who voted for him. All right. It was, I mean, it's one of those moments that tips that's like a reality moment. So sure enough, it was investigated and it was found that this domain software had turned 6,000 votes for Trump into Biden votes and all down the ticket. And once it was corrected, Trump picked up 6,000 votes in Michigan. Now it turns out that
But that's just one county.
Yeah, but it turns out that this same domain software is being used by over 40 counties in Michigan. And already a second county is looking at it and talking about doing a hand recount. And the same domain software in recent years has been used, ironically, in Michigan, Pennsylvania, Georgia, Arizona, and Nevada, all contested states. The main stockholder of that company is, I believe, Dianne Feinstein's husband.
Yeah.
I think that Pelosi has a hand in it. This is something that, they're calling it a glitch, right? It's like, this is like Glitchgate.
Yeah.
Whether or not it's a glitch, I don't care if it was that or deliberate. The fact is that there's now big growing evidence that this is exactly what's happened, that these votes have been switched and done so through this electronic means. And we could be looking at, big, turnarounds in all of the states if and when this is investigated.
Well, here's kind of a side point. All right. Biden knows that all this is going on. So how come at this late stage, 47 years into his career, the supposed experienced politician doesn't do the right thing and just act gracious for at least a couple of weeks? But to start piling on when he's on a house of cards, as you just described here, just is so unseemly and stupid, really.
Well, I think that the strategy was to suddenly march forth like a banana Republican, declare him the winner, which was done by 3 networks, and we may note not any other networks have stepped in, and that they would then have the high ground in terms of emotion, momentum. They would have all the media on their side, the same people that sided with Mueller, the same people that sided with the perfect phone call. They would all come in. They probably spoke with them in advance and said, "Are you with us on this?" And then they would be able to then act as if he's the president and start to talk to foreign leaders and do other
things. But isn't
things.
it a violation of the Logan Act?
I think it is. And I think that this is something that Lieutenant General Michael Flynn was charged with a crime for doing. The fact is that I think Ted Cruz brought this up in the hearing recently, where he interviewed former FBI Assistant Director McCabe, who brought up the Logan Act and used it against Lieutenant General Flynn.
Right.
And that is that the Logan Act is not constitutional. It's never been enforced, that they have every right to talk to foreign leaders, and that Biden and his people are not violating anything any more than the Flynn did. But the point is that the reason they're doing this is to create what the Israelis like to call the facts on the ground. They're trying to make it look like they're in power. They've got a complete media blackout in high tech, in all the mainstream media, who are acting as if Biden is the president. They're calling him president-elect, which is not true. And they're attacking anybody who questions that. They actually have reporters going around interviewing Republican senators. Have you congratulated Biden yet? Have you congratulated Biden? And I think it was Ron Johnson who turned around and said, for what? I'm friendly with Biden, but I don't know what happened that I'm supposed to. Yeah, but in other words, this is the game they're going to play. I don't think that they expected Trump to step up the way he has. I think that they're used to, kind of weak-kneed responses, that Trump would probably have a meltdown or he would, sulk away. But Trump has stepped up with a very sharp legal team. He has gone into the states. They're getting affidavits by the thousands from people who are testifying to voter fraud. They are documenting it. Now you've got states attorney generals who are backing up an investigation of Pennsylvania. You finally got Attorney General Barr stepping up and saying that the district attorneys are going to be able to investigate charges of voter fraud, and that all this attack of people who are claiming voter fraud, that they're crazy. It's not. It's starting to crack.
Well,
And
it's starting to crack, but here's the other question. What if it completely turns around? What is the play of the media then? Oh, just kidding. How do you come back from that?
I think they're going to do I think that they're going to try to do everything they can to make it not happen. And that, who God knows what that might mean. These are very big players. This is a deep state.
What if it does happen?
Well, then they're going to get screwed. It's sort of like, maybe they'll keep, I mean, this may sound far-fetched, but a microcosmic example of what they might do is Stacey Abrams in Georgia. Stacey Abrams lost her election in Georgia, but she has never conceded, and she's delusional. She goes around acting like she's actually the governor. I mean, the woman is out of her mind, but she's backed by the media who trot her out as this heroic figure. I mean, she's on the national press. They're running her in ads.
Right, but if Trump,
I think they could try this on a national scale. Trump is not. In other words, they're going to now have a talking point that they're going to run with for the next 4 years if Trump is elected, and that is that he's not legitimate. It's the same thing they've been saying for the last 4 years. He's not legitimate. He stole the election. He's, and we're going to never hear the end of it. It's going to be day after day, and it's not going to work.
But here's what's different. Here's what's different. They didn't do this to this sort of extent. No one went and called Hillary Clinton president-elect.
Well, Hillary Clinton, I mean, to her credit, she accepted the defeat.
She never conceded personally.
No, she did. She conceded over the phone to Trump before he went on stage, and the next day she conceded. Right. She did. Yeah, she did, to her credit, because that's a more conventional approach. That's what, you'd expect them to do. Maybe Biden might even do that. I don't know. I mean, who knows what he's going to do.
Okay, well, I mean, this is a funny scenario. All right, what if it turns around, Biden has to concede? Then what does the media do? I mean, how do you come back from this? Oh, just kidding.
Oh, please.
They've lost a lot of credibility, I will tell you. And the other thing,
man.
which is related to this, is the ratings of Fox have dropped precipitously. They're now lower than CNN. And even on their top guys, Tucker and Hannity are not even in the top 10.
Oh, so, there's now information that's come out which indicates that Rupert Murdoch, who turned the reins over to his 2 liberal sons and their more liberal wives, didn't like Trump and wanted to stop Trump and gave orders to do so, to play Trump down. Who knows why? I mean, he's probably, I don't think he's a liberal, but, they don't like Trump because of the America First. They're internationalists. They're, they're globalists. They're free traders. They don't like his policies. And it's so obvious that Fox News was absolutely biased. Worse, I thought that Rachel Maddow did a better job.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know.
There were some hot mic moments the last few days.
Yeah.
But the point is that, and then when Cavuto switched away from the Trump press conference.
Oh, yeah. From Kayleigh McEnany talking about voter fraud, he throws his hands in the air and he says, "We can't hear this false. I can't take this. I can't take this." And on the night of the election, they were slow to call Florida. They were slow to call Ohio. They falsely called Arizona. As I said, MSNBC, the most biased of all networks, they did a more responsible job.
No doubt about it.
Yeah. I mean, they actually called Florida and Ohio. But it was obvious.
Charles, what's the play here? Okay, now you've turned off your core audience. What are you going to do? Be more MSNBC than they are?
No, they're going to become
these other ones.
I think they're going to go the way of the dodo bird. They're going to be like, your local cable's TV station. I just don't. I don't know if they can recover from this, nor should they. And it's sort of like, I think that the bias of Facebook and Twitter is starting to take a toll on them too. I mean, I don't know if you noticed, but Parler, which competes with Twitter, they had a bigger rating than Twitter
Yes.
last week. You've got other venues. You got Rumble competing with YouTube. You got Gab, which is a smaller, but they're still out there. And I think that people are switching. I think it's starting to hurt them. They're not going to go away, but at least they're being identified as for their biases. And there's going to be some real competition. I mean, there are people who are now literally shutting down their Facebook and YouTube and Twitter accounts, and they're going to, Rumble and Parler.
Now, how come Parler has done so much better than Gab?
Well, Parler is a Twitter-like thing. I mean, you write these blurbs. Gab is video.
Well, no, Gab is a Twitter-like
is it?
platform also.
I don't know much about Gab.
But it didn't seem to catch on as much as Parler, and I don't know why.
Well, I mean, I don't know as much about Gab. I mean, I have Parler, but I think Gab has been tarred with some of the real extreme right-wing stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think
the Groyper kind
of. The trouble with censorship is that if you don't do it at all, then you're going to get these wingnut situations,
right?
Which is going to give a bad look to your platform. But on the other hand, if you do censorship, it's never even-handed.
Well, I think that Gab is very. I mean, again, I don't want to say because I don't know this, but their logo is the frog, which is the Groyper symbol.
Yeah.
And right, and I think that they are openly into, ethnic nationalism. Let's just put it that way. I don't know. Again, I don't want to.
They're a little more upfront with that, and a little more activist in that the Corba, who's the founder, is very outspoken, and I think the people behind Parler just let their platform happen.
Yeah, Parler is doing what we had hoped that Twitter would do, and it's the right thing to do, which is that they are a forum for everyone within community standards. And, you can't go on there and advocate, overthrowing the government or violence or racism. They allow for freedom of speech. I think Gab has more of a political tone, which is fine. That's their business. I don't think they're advocating any of the above either, but they are a home for a very particular political view, and that's fine. You can have, for that matter, why not set up a communist Twitter company? I mean, this is free speech. We have to trust people to exercise that speech within the confines of what's acceptable to the community.
Now, what's this? This is a local thing for you in Massachusetts. Did this law pass, or is it just proposed, where full-on abortion up to birth, and if the baby survives, you can't resuscitate it?
It's being proposed. It's in the state legislature. I mean, how could it? We've had liberal abortion laws going all the way back to the 70s, right around the time of Roe versus Wade. Why now do they suddenly have to further liberalize abortion? Is this something is there a great social need for this all of a sudden? Suddenly we have a clamoring by women to have abortions the day before they're to give birth. This is suddenly something that, they're stepping up for as a champion. I don't really know the answer to that, but Massachusetts legislature is to the left of Pyongyang. I mean, we're talking real radical here. It's been kept in check by Republican governors, including Mitt Romney. The Republican governor right now, I don't really think highly of, that being Charlie Baker.
Right.
Pretty bad. But, generally there have been Republican governors who have kept them in check. I don't know, maybe now because of Baker is a complete.
Well, are there regions of the state that don't produce the same left-wing representative?
There are, but they're very small. And Massachusetts is a great example of a state that has been gerrymandered, going all the way back to Governor Elbridge Gerry, right? Which was around the time of George Washington. That's where the term comes from, where states are sliced and diced and local districts to try to help diffuse the more conservative vote and to keep everybody, to keep it in the hands of the left. And, that's what's happened in this state. And I will say that Trump did a little bit better here than he did last time.
Hmm.
In 2016, Trump got slightly under 1 million votes. This time around, he got slightly over 1 million votes.
Okay.
And what's interesting about that is that the areas that really went for Trump were the cities of Lawrence, Fall River, and New Bedford, high Hispanic populations. The Hispanics all came out.
Okay.
Yeah, and the Hispanics, blacks, every ethnic group, and even women and suburban women. The only group that Trump did not do better in and actually did worse in was white men.
Really?
Yeah. So, I mean, it kind of flies in the face of this whole, lie that somehow Trump and his supporters are white supremacists. That's for sure.
Wow.
I've had some debates about this with some of these people on TikTok.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure, you put yourself out there, you're going to get some negative comments. But what's the ratio of how many people say, great compared to, are these people just trolls?
Well, the people people have called me a troll, and maybe I am in a sense. I mean, I'm commenting on other people's videos.
Yeah.
I mean, whatever troll means. I mean, I'm not doing it to be provocative. I'm doing it because I want to call them out, and say, hey. People either don't respond or they respond negatively. Once in a while, I get a positive, but most people will, try to let me have it. And that's fine.
Yeah.
I don't mind that. That's debate.
That's what it is. Well, you've been doing that for years anyway.
I have. So that's our synopsis on the election. I think that there is some indication that both Michigan and Wisconsin may be back in play because of this domain software.
Yes.
And the gap there is very, very tight. I think that there is a growing awareness among the population in general that there has been a major case of stealing the election, which I don't think most people, even most people who voted for Biden, are going to want to see. And as it becomes more apparent and as it leaks out, it's going to turn on Biden. I don't think that it's something, it's just most Americans are not going to find that acceptable, even if they despise Trump. They're not going to find this.
At what point does the media have to face this?
It's coming soon, I think. I think the day of reckoning is going to come. I think that it's probably going to be if either Arizona or Georgia go for Trump. I've noticed that they don't even admit that North Carolina has declared for Trump. They won't admit this. It has. They won't admit it.
Which I find, as cynical as I am, I find that inexplicable.
Yeah.
Because, you can't deny the sky is blue. What's the point?
Well, that's where they are right now. They are literally flat out lying about this, and they're demonizing anyone who disagrees. I don't think that they expected this kind of opposition. It didn't occur to them that Trump would have the kind of vote that he got. It did, or that Republicans would do as well in the congressional races. Apparently, by the way, they've taken 3 more seats in California.
Yes.
The margin for Democrat control of the House is shrinking. It's going to, if they do end up controlling it at the end of the day.
With 7 or 8 votes.
Yeah. I mean, and we're talking 7 or 8 out of 400 seats.
Yeah.
So, this is not, and I think also on the state level and on the state legislative level, they've absolutely been walloped. So, that's going to bode very poorly for them if, heaven forbid, Biden is president in 2 years during the midterms. If Trump is reelected, I think it's going to be a great day for this country.
Well, it's almost been, I don't want to sound silly here, but it's almost that this scenario, as you're predicting, is better than an immediate victory. It's like giving the opponent a chance to think he won. And then it's almost like a football game where you're winning and winning and winning, and there's a score as time runs out.
It's like rope-a-dope.
Yeah.
I don't care. I just want to get the win. I mean,
Right.
I don't really care how it happens. I don't care if it's ugly or what. The thing is that what they're doing, besides trying to steal the election, is going to be very irresponsible, because if in fact Trump does win, and I think he is going to win, within the next 2 weeks, maybe
Wow.
3, then it's
Okay,
not only,
viewers, remember this. Remember that Charles just said that.
yes, I did.
All
And
right.
not only is it going to be the story of the century, but it's going to cause all of the leftist Marxists to come out and start looting black businesses and burning black neighborhoods and killing black people, just like they did over the summer. And for that reason, the media is completely irresponsible by not at least giving some heads up to average people who don't really know what's going on,
Yeah.
that this might be coming down the pike. Right now, there is nothing, not a peep from them. It's as if we're talking about an alternative universe. If you watch Lester Holt or Stephanopoulos or any of these people, they know what's going on. They know that this whole thing is shaky at best, but they're not letting on at all. You can tell from even looking at them.
Who are they trying to fool?
They're trying to prop this thing up and figure out how to make it happen. I mean, you can tell from looking at their faces when they talk about it that they know what's going on. You know, you cannot hide this completely. You know, propaganda has a way of showing its artificiality, but you have to pay attention. And I think people are sensing it.
Well, the interesting figure was, despite the complete blackout on the Biden corruption thing with his son,
Right.
the statement was made after the election. 37% of those that voted for Biden were not aware of this corruption thing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, okay, that means that what 63% were. So even in this embargo,
Well, they hate Trump. They
Yeah.
just they don't care. It's this irrational.
Well, it was irrational hate, but they knew that this was going on despite the embargo.
And they didn't care.
Yeah.
It's disgusting.
Well, it's pure hatred.
And by the way, speaking of that, it's now come out that Biden and his son, but Biden in particular, are being investigated by the FBI and have been investigated for this past year, and that the Ukrainians have just announced that they're investigating the what they're calling blackmail and extortion on the part of Biden. Where when he spoke, we all know the famous video. I mean, they can't suppress that. When he was speaking in front of the Council on Foreign Relations.
Yeah, I mean, and that was played again and again.
Oh yeah, and that's that's being investigated. That he actually got this man fired who was investigating Burisma Oil, and threatened to withhold money, from them unless he was fired. That's that's open blackmail. It's coercion. It's influence peddling. It's all kinds of things. And the media is not talking at all about the fact that the Ukrainian government has just announced that that's under a full investigation, and that the whole rotten, Trump impeachment, that's been vindicated because Trump was absolutely right. The Ukrainians should have investigated Biden.
Right.
Had every right to ask them to do it.
Well, what about this statement that you've seen on video many, many times, where Biden comes out and says, "We built the greatest voter fraud organization in history"?
Oh, yeah.
Now,
it is.
What kind of a Freudian slip would that have been?
That's incredible.
What was he trying to say? Was he the greatest voter some organization? Or?
Well, I mean, I think people are chalking it up to his dementia. Now, all of a sudden, they're like, well, it was, he doesn't really play with a full deck. Or either you're going to say that's just the description of the next commander-in-chief of the United States, the next chief executive, somebody who is not mentally competent, or he was telling the truth, which he was.
Yeah,
it did set up the biggest voter fraud machine in the history of American politics. That's exactly what he said, and that's what happened. And I mean, I just think that this is the story of the century. We need to get a hold of this.
Well, there's a theory that comes out of Catholic theology that applies here. It's very interesting that God and Satan made a deal, which was the evil side always has to show its hand. And I've seen countless examples of this over the years. But here, I mean, this was flagrant. Well, and the Council for Relations, how could he deny that? And
son of a bitch. He was fired, right? I mean, and yet they play it and they just don't say anything. It's almost like it didn't happen. Yeah, I mean, I think this whole rotten thing is going to reach a point of critical mass. Every day it's moving forward. Now, it has to happen soon, because at the same time, every day that it doesn't happen creates another day where there's a sense of inevitability. People are getting used to the idea that Biden is going to be the president. So this is a very, very dangerous game. I mean, it has to be, there's got to be progress. And I think there will be. Trump has tweeted out that watch for early next week when everything is going to start to come out.
And there were annotations on that tweet, by the way.
Oh, really?
Yeah, well, of course.
Well, yeah, that's right. Censorship. So, so far, Trump usually is telling the truth about these things. So we should sit tight and watch. They are compiling. I mean, Kayleigh McEnany and her team, Ronna, what's her name? Daniel. They are compiling. They're very carefully and very methodically compiling thousands of affidavits from people who are testifying to voter fraud. You've got the investigation of the domain computer glitches in all of the states that are contested. You've got all the conventional type of voter fraud in spades. You've got the shutdown of the states and the arrival of all these vans at 4:00 in the morning, filled with ballots that were made out only to Biden.
Well, yes.
And only 100% for Biden. I mean, you'd think that they might have used, I mean, this is like criminality 101, right? I mean, you try to make it look a little bit like something else might have happened. You throw in a few hundred, Trump votes just to make it look a little cleaner.
Well, at least what they didn't do is take a package of 100,000 ballots and just have a big label all over it saying, these are all Biden. Don't worry about opening them. Yeah.
They might as well have. And, one of the very frightening aspects to this is that we'll never really know fully the extent to which there was voter fraud, because so many of these ballots, could be hundreds of thousands, could be millions, have been completed. They'll never be detected.
Yeah.
I mean, they're now, they've been mixed into the drink. It's like, you're never going to get them out.
The sort of smoking gun aspect of it is, though, that everything was going Trump's way until that time when everybody stopped.
That's right.
It was just a little too convenient.
Yeah, I mean, people, they stopped it just before midnight, like around 11 o'clock.
Yeah.
People went to bed around 1 o'clock thinking, everything's going to be fine. Trump was ahead in all of these states. In Pennsylvania, he was ahead by over 500,000 votes.
It was 600,000 something votes.
Yeah. I think in Michigan and Georgia, it was like 300,000.
Right.
In North Carolina and Wisconsin, it was about 200 or 100,000. The point is, he was ahead in all of them. And then you wake up the next morning and it's like, ooh,
yeah,
something happened. It's just really, it's really rotten. It's just the most.
Well, it's going to play out soon. I mean, that's the advantage, is that there's sort of a hard deadline.
There is
December 8th. And the other thing is ego, that none of the states ultimately want to look that stupid and incompetent. So they're going to have to get something together.
Well, I think that's what's going on now. Like in Georgia, they're going to have an audit and they're going to try to do something to sort of save face. And even Pennsylvania, which is the worst, I think they're going to try to do something because they want to save their vote cheating machine for next time. One of the things that might really come out of this is that this kind of vote cheating in the big rotten cities with their Democrat hack machines, that's not going to ever happen quite the same way if Trump prevails.
Yeah.
They're not going to get away with that again. There's too much light shined on that now. And I just think that those days might be over. There might be, and also the computer fraud. I mean, that's, I think, a huge scandal.
Yeah. The thing about the computer fraud is once detected, you can't play that game anymore. No one believes it's a glitch because a glitch would tend to mean that it might go either way. But the errors always seem to favor the Democrats, just
Right.
like the polling. There's never been a poll that was wrong in favor of Republicans that I've ever
That's
seen.
right. And I think that this so-called glitch, this has happened before. I think it happened
Yeah,
with the Romney race,
yeah.
right? I mean, they had the thing where if you touch the pencil like too close to the edge of the spot, it would immediately go for Obama.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of reports of that. So it's not new. It was all swept under the rug. But now, if this comes out and if Trump is reelected, there's going to be major hell to pay for that kind of voter fraud. It's going to really, become obvious. I hope, and we'll see. I mean, it's Nevada, by the way, is another state which is rampant fraud. People who had, thousands of people who died are on the payrolls and they were not purged. You got people sending ballots in from other states. It's obvious. It's becoming more and more obvious every day that these are hack political machines who appear to have coordinated with each other across state lines and nationally, and were prepared to do what was ever necessary to make sure that Trump was not reelected. And they feel perfectly justified in it because of their demented hatred for Trump. And they just,
Well, here's the other thing, though. How do you marshal such a universal hatred of Trump to the extent that people are willing to break the law?
Well, because it's a daily drumbeat of propaganda that started the minute he went down the escalator. Every single day, it's like Chinese water torture. It's just drip, 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 drip. You get the digest of it. If people just go with Lester Holt every night as their source of news, they will never see a positive thing said about Trump ever. Not in 4 years. When he had the peace accords between Israel and the Arab states, they looked like choking to try to say something, and they even then they were like wouldn't even mention Trump's name, even though he was absolutely
Of course.
the main player in that. And it was just this twisting. It's like, oh, I mean, you know, um, who was it on Channel 2? Andrea Mitchell. Oh my God! I mean, they cannot bring themselves, and yet they'll run with a full national story about something that's completely false. They get Trump's sister-in-law
I
or
got to
something.
tell you, someone like her is among the worst.
Oh,
Uh, Leslie
clearly.
Stahl and so on. These people have been around for 1,000 years that you and I watched on TV as kids. And they've just fallen into this. It is.
It's hard. I mean, it was great to run that 60 Minutes interview in its entirety. You could just see how hateful they were and just dripping with rage. That was the whole atmosphere. I don't know what happened in your neighborhood, but here in Boston, when it was announced suddenly like a coronation that Biden was going to be the president,
Right.
all this hatred was pouring out of the street. People using, F you and F this and F that and waving weird flags.
And putting together enemies lists now.
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, right. And, that includes, I think is it Chuck Schumer or somebody, fairly
Oh, for
high up,
sure. Yeah.
talking about truth and reconciliation commissions, and AOC and all of this crap, I mean, I sent her, I mean, I've had some tweets with her on Twitter. I said, hey, sign me up for it. Here's my name. Put me on the list. Put my name in large letters, like the way John Hancock signed
Yeah.
the Declaration of Independence. Make sure the king can see it
Yeah.
without his glasses. That's fine. But yeah, that's how ugly this has gotten. It's just hateful,
But let all this hate come
vengeful.
out, and because it tends to destroy the hater. Sounds like a cliche, but can you imagine walking around with that much hate 24 hours a day?
It's just I don't know what happened to these people. Were they like something happened to them as children? I don't know. I'd hate to think about it, but it's demented, and I think that now you see an atmosphere of sullen silence. They're not hitting the streets now because they all sense that there's something coming
Yeah.
down.
Yeah.
There's like a kind of nobody wants to say anything too stupid. They already had their moment of rage. And, look, if Trump, and I think he will be, when he wins, they're going to try it again and it ain't going to work.
No.
Because
No,
everyone's going to be
it's
like,
the same old playbook.
yeah,
And you can't base a long-term strategy on hate. It just doesn't work.
they might go out and kill a few more black people, burn a few more black homes, loot a few more black businesses, but it ain't gonna go anywhere further than that. And
No.
most people are gonna stand up to them and say, F you.
Yeah.
It's over. It's over. Go back to your holes. Come back, we'll see you later. And it'll be devastating for them, and they know it. And that's why they're all kind of like, as I say, they're all kind of hiding in their hell holes. I mean, we're not hearing anything from them. So, anyways,
what else is couple of weeks?
Yeah, I think we've chewed on that one.
Yeah.
The vaccine.
All right, let's talk about the vaccine.
Yeah, because let me just, before you get into it, I just want to ask you. President Trump, I think he should probably keep his mouth shut right now about things because the elections happened, the votes being counted.
Yeah.
But he can't help himself, and he did mention, and I wonder, that Merck or Pfizer withheld the fact that they had this vaccine ready a couple of weeks before the election because they didn't want to help Trump.
Well, I think he's not the only one who said that. I think the original person who said it was James Woods, because knowing how drug discovery works, it is just inconceivable that on this day, we just discovered that it's 90% effective, but they're hyping it a little bit, and I'll tell you why. The 90% is probably true, but there are some issues in distribution which they haven't mentioned. Mm-hmm. This is an RNA vaccine. RNA is very unstable. You have to get this vaccine and keep it at around minus 94 degrees. So it's not impossible, but there's going to be a lot of logistics involved in transporting this. Not every Tom, Dick, and Harry has a minus 94 cooling chamber. They're going to have to be set up for that. How long it's going to last, because with these vaccines, fine, you take it out of this deep freeze, you've got to manipulate it. I don't know how much they know about the short-term stability of it in just actually taking it out of the freezer and then dispensing it. Obviously, they've done this, but that seems to be an issue that they have to look at. I think there's also other vaccines that show promise, and Fauci says that he thinks by April of next year, anyone who wants a vaccine would have had it.
Is there a history of the use of these RNA vaccines?
It's not that common.
I mean, do we know the long-term possible effects of them, or what they do even to a person short-term? I mean, is there any research on that?
Well, there's not much, I don't think, because there's never been a successful vaccine for a coronavirus.
But I mean, have there been other RNA type vaccines for other things?
Yeah.
Okay.
But
so the technology is not necessarily completely unknown or new.
No.
Are you going to get the vaccine, Mike?
Well, here's the thing. I would certainly be cautious, but I don't have to worry about being cautious because I'm not going to be on the list. I think it's going to go to healthcare. It's going to go to very compromised individuals. And okay, I'm older, so I might be on that type of thing, but I don't think there's going to be anything dangerous about it. The whole trick is how long is it going to last? When you get your flu vaccine, you think it's going to last through that flu season. Mm-hmm. is this thing, it might be 90% effective, but for how long?
How long would these things normally be effective? A year, maybe?
I don't think I don't know that there's that much data on that. Because how do they know? Because they only came up with the final formulation a few months ago.
And do we know of any possible side effects? I know that, like, I have, I think it was a few years ago. I mean, I don't get the flu vaccine because I got a flu vaccine and I had a pretty bad reaction to it. I considered checking into the hospital. I decided
Really?
not to because I was having breathing. I couldn't breathe. And so I haven't gotten one since.
There are
Yeah.
people with the current flu vaccine, and if you're a senior, you're supposed to get the high dose.
Mhm.
There are people who claim that they had a bad reaction to that. But it's always problematical because were you going to get sick anyway?
Right.
Did the vaccine cause it? The etiology of this stuff is not simple. And by the way, related to this is that big mask study showing that they a meta-analysis of 1,000 counties showing a drop in hospital admissions. That study has been retracted. We just retracted November 4th.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason it was retracted is that the hospital admissions started going up in some of these counties.
Right.
And here's the thing. It's not precise. How does everybody wear a mask? I've seen kids go around there's gaps in the thing. It's a joke. There's other people that seem to wear the same mask until they fall apart.
Mm-hmm.
So there's really no uniformity in how these masks are deployed.
Right.
But the study which I referred to in my last article, the ones that seem to be the best documented are that on the onboard aircraft, if you comply with a mask, there's almost zero chance of getting COVID on an aircraft. Plus, they've cleaned it up. They've increased the amount of ventilation.
They've got those great filters, which they say the air quality
Yeah.
is better than in your own home.
Yeah. So they've really done something with that. But my advice to people on masks is it's probably better than nothing. But how quantitative can you be? But again, there's people that are going absolutely nuts with this.
Oh, tell me about it. But I mean, one of the things that I did before the virus, among other work I've done and the writing and the podcasting and other businesses, is that I drove Uber. I don't know if you know that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I remember your video when you were the Uber guy.
That's right. And I loved driving Uber. I had such a great time. I'd get up early. I'd have to take people to the airport. I'd meet people. It was fascinating and amazing. I want to go back to it. And I think that my family has let me know in very uncertain terms that I have to have the vaccine before I do. And so I'll have the vaccine and I'll take my chances in order to go back to driving Uber. And I feel like if there are long-term negative effects to it, and I read articles, 20 years down the road, you'll get, cancer. I mean, I'll probably be dead by then anyways. So I want to get going now. So I am going to try to get the vaccine if it's available.
When you were doing this Uber thing, I watched some of those videos. Did you engage people?
Oh, yeah. I have had fascinating. I met people from all walks of life in all parts of the city, from all backgrounds. I've met professors. I debated politics. I had a guy in the car who was actually a high-level professor at MIT on climate change, who I took to the airport because he was on his way to an international conference. And he explained to me climate change in a way that I would never have otherwise learned. I can't mention who he is because it's a private conversation, but
yeah.
He really, I've learned from people. I mean, when my daughter was applying to college, I talked to admissions offices and students and professors about different colleges and what the culture was like. And I got a lot of inside information about how to do that and how to apply. And there are so many things I've learned. It's such a fascinating thing.
Gee.
I really love doing it. I mean, it's Yeah, it's amazing. I've given people tours of the city and talked about the history, people visiting. I've helped. I mean, I talked to a guy who was thinking of suicide. I mean, I sat with him in the parking lot of a
Drive
bar.
me off the bridge.
Yeah, I mean, he was really drunk, and I basically talked him down from suicide. I spent some
Wow.
time. I mean, I've had some amazing conversations with people in every sense. It's a fascinating thing to do. And
And it
so
was flexible enough you can turn it on and turn it
you
off, right?
turn
You
it on and
go
off anytime you want.
and
Exactly.
you pick up a few people and then just come home and
That's right. Do my podcasting, my writing. I could do it whenever I felt like doing it. And I had a ball. I mean, taking the college kids to parties, I mean, it was fun.
so you work late hours too sometimes,
Oh, yeah. Sometimes. I mean, I like to make a certain amount every week. And if I
right?
wasn't there yet by Friday or Saturday, I'd do a late night, and it was fun. It is. It's amazing. I loved Uber.
Did you ever pick up people late at night that were kind of sketchy and you wondered if maybe you shouldn't have picked them up?
Well, I mean, I try to be street smart. I mean, I wouldn't at that time of night, I wouldn't pick anyone up unless they were getting off at the Amtrak,
Yeah,
or the airport, or something.
yeah,
I wouldn't just pick somebody up in a bad neighborhood.
yeah.
You have to, use common sense with Uber. I never had a problem. I had a couple of people. I shouldn't say this, but it was right after there had been a terrorist attack um, in Belgium by radical Muslims,
Mm,
and I picked up these three Muslim guys in a tough neighborhood, very scary looking. They had like the clipped beard,
yeah, yeah.
and two of them sat in the back seat, one of them sat next to me, and I was nervous. I kept like glancing at his hands, just to see. And they turned out to be perfect gentlemen, and I
Yeah,
think they
yeah.
could tell I was nervous. But nothing ever came of anything. I mean, there's obviously risks involved when you're doing that. I mean, I had to explain to my daughter, who was nervous when I started, that she said, I had to say, look, the worst case scenario, is that I'd be killed, but that's not likely. You just you kind of operate with caution.
Now, how does it work if what are the mechanics of it that okay, you get on your phone and you want to go from use it obviously, but from the other side, how does it work? What how does it pick which driver is going to pick up that guy?
It's a brilliant app. I don't exactly know how it works, but I think it goes with the person that's nearest
Ah, okay.
to the passenger.
Yeah, all right.
And it's just, it works well. It's amazing. I love doing Uber and
Okay.
Lyft.
Yeah.
I did both.
No, that's
So
fine.
I want to get back to it, and as I say, I mean, I'll take the vaccine if that's what it takes, so my family can feel confident that I won't catch the virus. Plus, I don't want to catch the virus.
Yeah, of course not.
So we'll see.
Yeah,
Anyway, but what about Cardinal Carrick? Cardinal
all right.
McCarrick?
The McCarrick report came out,
Yeah.
and it's been uh, let's say interpreted differently depending on what side of the fence you're on. It tries to paint the picture that Pope Francis was very quick in recognizing this problem, which is not exactly the case.
Yeah.
It tried to throw back, and I think there's some truth to this, that when McCarrick was confronted by John Paul II, John Paul believed him. And I have to tell you that I've met older priests that would tell me stuff like, look, Mike, I know that this kind of stuff goes on, but I've never seen it amongst the priests that I work with. And there was a lot of that. It was not so much denial. It was that this idea, until it became obviously untrue, this idea that, yes, it happened, but it was so rare. And they said, well, it's rare and rare. And then, of course, Archbishop Vigano gets into it. And he is cast in this report as somewhat of a bad guy, but they have to admit that he was trying to get this stuff to happen. So it's a little politically slanted, but it certainly doesn't look good for McCarrick, obviously.
No.
And they took their sweet time writing it. But as with so many of these things, it's not going to please too many people because everybody has their own spin on it.
I mean, I think that like anything else, you know, it's hard to believe that this kind of stuff would happen to people that, particularly when they're in positions of trust like that. You know, we don't want to think these things about leaders.
Right.
It's hard to do that. You know,
And it was much more prevalent back in the day. That you just didn't. I mean, it was not common to hold these kind of thoughts. It was certainly known among the church in New York that Spellman was a notorious homosexual.
right.
But somehow, like Liberace, you know, the women didn't want to believe that he was the dream lover and so on. Just different times.
Yeah, I mean, people are like, in a way, it's right out in the open and it's obvious, but yet you still don't, it's like anything else. You don't want to think about people involved in these sorts of things.
Right.
It's just, and yet they are. And it's, sometimes when you point it out, you're the villain. That how dare you criticize, I remember I had actually, speaking of Uber, I had an argument with this guy who was close to the Biden family. He was from, he was a Harvard student. And I made some mild criticism and he was like, how dare you criticize that family? It's
what they're supposed to be beyond criticism.
People in positions of power, it's like, maybe it's a cult thing. Maybe it's just a suspension of credulity. I think we all, to an extent, do this. We don't want to think about people in positions that we respect. We want to respect them. We don't want to think about them involved, even if we don't agree with them. You just don't, I don't think people thought about like what Kennedy was up to until like the 1970s, right?
Yeah.
When the whole thing came out with Judith Campbell Exner and all of his business, because we didn't want to think about him that way. We admired him. I still admire him, but you don't want to, there are things that are obvious, but yet it's hard to believe,
Well, that's exactly the right expression. It's hard to believe. You don't want to believe it. I didn't have quite that frame of reference because at a very young age, I was exposed to that sort of thing and learned pretty young that many people in authority weren't really that.
We're not who we thought they were.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And but I was always cynical, and I got into trouble for it too.
Yep. And sometimes when you speak out too loudly, I mean, you get, you're the one that becomes vilified.
Yeah.
For
well, no, I mean, this is human nature. When
exactly.
I was when I was the vice commissioner of a Pop Warner football league, the husband and wife of the treasurer were stealing money. And by the way, it is not uncommon at all for youth sports for people to steal money. Yeah. I can tell you stories that it would blow your mind. But they had stole about $7,000. And I was the bad guy for accusing them. Of course, it was obvious they did it. But
and did it result in their being exposed? I mean,
no, they never paid it back. They had this excuse and that excuse.
But they were obviously kicked out of the club.
Yeah. But it was my fault for being a bad guy. But this was a culture of and when I was involved in a soccer league, it was a huge league. There was a snack bar that took in, I don't know, $1,500 a weekend or something. It was gigantic, right? Mm-hmm. And the league was always broke. But
something obviously wasn't adding up on that one.
Yeah, well, the commissioner's wife would always be taking these trips to Hawaii. This is when I was in LA. Yeah. And this guy just had some blue-collar job with the phone company. I mean, he wasn't making any big money. And when I would raise the point, well, that's Stan. I said, what do you mean that's Stan? He's stealing money. Well, good old Stan. And it was amazing.
The only situation I could think of is my late father was a member of a yacht club, and his very best friend at the yacht club, who he loved. I mean, he was a great guy. Turned out that he was embezzling money from the club for years and a lot of money. And it was just such a shock, that, I mean, that he was completely kicked out. I don't know if anything else happened, but it was like it was a huge scandal. I mean, it was just because he was such a, nice, beloved guy that this could be. How could this be? So, I mean, that's just corruption. That's what happens.
Yeah.
Anyhow,
People are fallible.
they are. Exactly. And I think that the Catholic Church has a little bit of a vulnerability because of its hierarchical structure. And, when you have a bad apple working into the works, it is a tendency to circle the wagons. I mean, there's a tendency to not want to hurt the whole basket, Whereas if it's like a one-shot, smaller group, it's a little easier. But either way, you have corruption in any organization, because there's always going to be people who want to take advantage. And by the way, last time we spoke, and I talked about my book, God is God.
Yes.
You made an offhand recommendation that I should write a book about the devil. Well, I'm doing it. And I'm in it. I've already started, and I have an outline, and I'm working on it. And it is going to
That's great.
And I'm going to credit you in the book.
Okay, well, is it going to be a 2-volume series or 3-volume series?
Well, what would the third volume be about? I don't know. It's just going to be a sequel. It's sort of a continuation of the story. So that's what I'm up to.
It might end up just being, you're right, it might just be a 2-volume set.
Right, exactly. I mean, I suppose the third one could be about the Holy Ghost. I don't know, but
but God, I think, takes that into account. So
that's right. That's right. But it's an interesting subject, and of course, at the very core of the issue is the greatest paradox of human existence, which is, how can an all-knowing, all-loving God who created the universe allow for evil?
That's the problem of evil.
I mean, this is the great paradox, and I don't claim to be able to address it. I'm going to interview people. I'm going to read up on it. I'm going to study it. But, this is the crux of the issue. How can there be a satanic influence or Satan in a world where God is the only God? God is one. Anyway, so I'm thinking about these things.
Yeah, it could be good. And to juxtapose both of these books, you have a nice sunny cover on this one. You're probably going to have a more dark theme.
I would say so.
The cover.
Yeah.
That one.
It'll be a picture of Beelzebub,
And unfortunately, that one will probably be more popular.
Well, maybe I could market it as a two-volume set.
Yeah. Because people always, the dark side is always more interesting, and it's the same thing. It's human nature.
Oh yeah. That's why you have the whole genre of like the Dracula movies and Frankenstein and horror.
It's not just that. I mean, in music, you have a major key and a minor key, and the melodies written in a minor key are much more interesting than those written in a major key. It's just something about.
Well, you know what? I mean, this is a thought that I'm having as I think about this issue, and that is that in order for there to be good, there has to be evil. Because otherwise, good wouldn't mean anything. It wouldn't have any value if there wasn't the temptation for evil, because, good is something we have to try to perceive and work toward and understand, because there is evil. I mean, that, it goes back to, the Garden of Eden, I guess, metaphorically, but,
that's exactly right. I mean, sin has an allure.
It does, extremely.
And that is what makes it, that's where temptation comes from, and fallible man and the whole bit.
Exactly.
And then, of course, in for a penny, in for a pound sort of thing. So it's going to be interesting to contrast those two books.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. It's I'm in. It's a great project.
Okay.
So, Mike, listen, I hope that next week we have better news on the election front. Let's, be vigilant about this. Let's keep studying it. I can't stop studying it. And again, I think that the bellwethers in this next week are going to be what happens in Arizona and Georgia. That's what's going to be key. And then from there, it'll be on to Pennsylvania. I believe that Trump will win. It's going to be very, very tricky, though. It's a real nail biter. given everything that's happened.
Well, I agree, and I'm glad you're predicting Trump. And
By the way, are you predicting Trump?
I would have to agree, yes, because, and here's why: they're on such shaky ground with this thing, and it's the old Shakespeare line. It sounds like a cliche. They're protesting too much. If
That's
you
right.
really think you had won, then why pound the table like this?
And why not care about the welfare of the whole country? I mean,
Yeah.
the fact they'd be willing to shred the entire society just to get power is the underlying theme here anyways.
Yeah.
So anyway, Mike, but listen, thanks so much for joining me as always.
Always a pleasure. And we'll be watching this week, I guarantee you.